Anytime a character dies in a story, it's hard not to think about all of the possibilities and what ifs if that character were to have survived or had a different fate. And in One Piece, Ace is a character this happens to most. Hell, even Oda himself has drawn what ifs about Ace. With that being said, there's still one scenario that hasn't been talked about much in regards to Ace, and that is, what if Yamato joined Ace? In my mind, there are 3 ways this could have happened. First is if Ace were able to use advanced form of armament Haki, he would have been able to break the shackles then and there and take Yamato off Onigashima. Second is Ace living through Marineford somehow and for some reason makes it to Wano when Luffy is there. And the third way is before Marineford, Whitebeard would have had to agree to let Ace, Izo, and Marco go free Wano, possibly coming himself. Getting into the first scenario, if Ace was able to remove Yamato's shackles when he originally made it to Wano, it was likely a 100% chance that Yamato would have joined Ace's Spade Pirates. I think Yamato would do everything they could to push Ace to reach Laugh Tale and become the Pirate King, since they know Ace had a high chance of being the person to fulfill the prophecy. You know, with him being a member of the D family and also being Roger's son. But with Yamato being as strong as they are, and also pushing Ace more than he would have by himself, Ace would probably be quite a bit stronger when we see him in the story as opposed to where he was when we first see him in Alabasta. So in this case, I think when he meets up with Jinbei and fights him, he might actually win this time, but still end up joining Whitebeard in the same way he did in the original story. Only this time, it'll likely happen a lot easier because Yamato had read Oden's logbook, so they can probably vouch for Whitebeard as a person and a pirate. This does create an interesting situation where Oden's second division is still open, and since Yamato wants to be Oden, it might create a bit of rivalry and sort of start a race to climb through Whitebeard's ranks, seeing who can make it first, Ace or Yamato. And I do know in the original story, Ace was not trying to climb Whitebeard's ranks, but with Yamato being there, I do think it'll push him in. Seeing as how they were kind of, like butting heads a lot in a friendly way when we first saw them at Onigashima, I think that kind of relationship would last and they'd always be competing against each other. So some situation like this could happen. Also, something that's important to mention is since Yamato would be trying to make Ace the Pirate King, they might not approve of him joining another crew. But as I said, Yamato has a lot of admiration and respect for the Whitebeard pirates. But also, we know that it was one of Whitebeard's goals to make Ace the Pirate King, since he knew what the D was, and was also probably thinking that Ace was a person that Roger was quote-unquote waiting for. So this is definitely something that Yamato and Whitebeard would have been able to connect and bond about, and it could lead to some funny hijinks with Yamato and Whitebeard trying to push Ace, but Ace continuing trying to make Whitebeard the king. I can see Ace getting frustrated, being pushed to something he doesn't really want for himself. So moving on, I think everything with Blackbeard would still probably happen the same way, because I don't think much would change. Yamato would be fine with staying with Whitebeard, while Ace looks for Blackbeard, so it would go as it originally did. But as a nice touch, I think it would be cool if Ace mentioned to Luffy in Alabasta that he met someone who had the same dream as him. Or I guess didn't meet someone, but met someone who told him about someone that had the same dream as him, which is Yamato telling him about Roger from Oden's logbook. Something like this would be further foreshadowing to Luffy's dream being deeper than just being Pirate King, but it will also tease Yamato as well as Roger's dream. Continuing on, Ace would still end up being captured and set up to have a public execution. Things would only start changing again once Marineford started, with Yamato being there now and Ace being a bit stronger in this instance than he was in the original story. Things really start getting interesting once Luffy shows up, because in this case, in the back of Yamato's mind is everything that Ace said about Luffy, and his dream being the same as Roger's. So when Yamato sees Luffy for the first time in person, they will definitely start to realize that Luffy is the one who's supposed to fulfill the prophecy of 20 years, and is likely the Joy Boy that they're waiting 20 years for, according to Oden's logbook. I think the outcome of Marineford will still end up being the same, with just a little more fight from the pirate side. Yamato will end up playing a similar role to Marco, but having more one-on-one time with higher tiered fighters like the Admirals. Not saying that they are a better fighter or a stronger fighter than Marco, but in this case, Marco definitely has to take on more of a leadership role when Whitebeard is busy fighting, and Yamato just isn't that type of person. So rather than doing other things like utility or helping with the other crewmates and leading them, Yamato would focusing mainly on getting to Ace and fighting the people in their way. Obviously, Yamato doesn't really scale up to the Admirals, but in the same way that Ace was able to clash with him a little bit once he got free in the original story, I think Yamato could do something similar to that, and even more because I do think Yamato would have been stronger than Ace at that point. But anyways, once Ace got free, he could have a better showing against Akainu and the other Admirals in terms of strength, but the strength gap in the end would still be there, and it'd be too large for Ace to do anything significant. at least in terms of actually stopping the admirals or escaping with Whitebeard instead of Whitebeard sacrificing himself to let the others escape. Really quick guys, if you like how this video is going, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this and any other kind of One Piece videos as well as other anime and manga videos. And leave a comment telling me how you think this would go, or if you think there's a different scenario altogether that I'm not seeing. But getting back into it, after Ace and Whitebeard die, Yamato would do as Whitebeard and Marco said, helping Luffy as much as possible, and then doing their best to keep them alive. Probably interacting with Jinbei and Buggy a lot in this situation, because that's kind of who was helping mainly in the original timeline, as well as Crocodile and a few others. I can't speak right now, I'm sorry. But there are a lot of funny interactions I could imagine with Yamato just due to how they act about certain people. Like, because of how they interact with Luffy, I can see Boa trying to fight them if Yamato gets too close to him. Like we saw in Onigashima, Yamato reacted very strongly to seeing Luffy. We can also see Yamato trying to talk to Buggy and Shanks about Roger. And I can see Shanks being playful with Yamato, kind of teasing them for having to stop their father before coming to Marineford, and that's why he's late. I think as the war is coming to an end, Yamato would have a decision to make about where they want to go next. For me, it doesn't make sense for Yamato to want to stay with the Whitebeard pirates after Ace and Whitebeard died, because at this point, Yamato would want to support the brother that Ace talked so much about during their time together. And knowing what Yamato knows, they would definitely believe that Luffy is the one who's going to bring about the dawn. So after the war ends, they would make the choice to follow Luffy. Now having someone who knows a lot about Wano on the crew, a lot of what we learn about Wano and the mysteries about the Scabbards will have to be explained and revealed mostly in Punk Hazard, as Yamato would know that they were supposed to be dead, forcing Kinemon to explain everything to the Straw Hats. Yamato would also be able to explain and teach Momo about the Devil Fruit much earlier, making him more prepared to fight going into the Wano arc. Getting to Dressrosa, Yamato would have to go with Sanji, as well as Nami, Brook, and Chopper, to Zou, as their involvement with Dressrosa would lead to a much easier time, because even with who we had in the original story, the only threats that were really there were Dofi and Fujitora. But Fujitora wasn't going to do anything in the first place, so we wouldn't need someone as strong as Yamato to help with the fight. So Dressrosa would probably go as usual, and I'm thinking a lot of Zou, specifically the time that Sanji, Nami, Brook, and Chopper spent at Zou, will go the same as it did in the original story as well, aside from Yamato being able to give a little more information about Jack. Now once the rest of the Straw Hats get there, Yamato would be able to explain some of the connection between Wano and Zou, at least a little bit from what they've read from Oden's logbook. Although similarly to Oden, Yamato probably wouldn't be excited to return back to Wano, they still do feel like they are partially responsible for freeing and opening up Wano, as they are Oden, and Oden wanted to open up Wano in preparation for Joyboy's return. And since Yamato actually believes that Luffy is the one that's supposed to be there in the 20-year prophecy, they definitely would like to try to free Wano before Luffy gets there after Whole Cake Island. So even if they have to go back to Wano for a little bit, they wouldn't mind because they feel like they have to fulfill their responsibilities as Oden. Yamato does know a lot more about Wano than everyone except for the Scabbards, so they will be able to blend in fairly well, but will probably draw attention to themselves in a funny way, similar to Luffy and Zoro. And in this scenario, Wano will probably become a lot more Yamato focused, with them being able to tie up all of their loose ends, and now being able to fully commit themselves to the Straw Hat crew. And by loose ends, I specifically mean their loose ends with Kaido, so dealing with everything with their family situation, possibly learning more about the Oni, but also with Oden and them coming to terms with the fact that they aren't Oden. I think in a similar way to Momonosuke proclaiming their name in front of all of the Beast Pirates when Kaido asked him, "Who are you?" he proudly, yelled to the skies that he's Momonosuke, son of Oden. I'm thinking there will be a stronger parallel between Yamato and Oden, being the children of very important people in Wano's history, Kaido and Oden. I think Yamato will have a similar situation to Momonosuke, where they will also have to proclaim their name to someone important, possibly even Kaido, or it could be in some way that Luffy inspires Yamato to, just be themselves. So Wano in this case would be very, very strongly focused on Luffy, Yamato, and Momonosuke, leading to a lot of growth and parallels between them, also comparing the two to Luffy, because Momonosuke and Yamato are very similar in a lot of ways. And then you look at Luffy, who has a situation where he could end up being very similar to them, where they're kind of living in the shadows of who came before them. In Momonosuke's case, it's Oden. In Yamato's case, it's Kaido, but instead of just not doing anything about it, Yamato proclaims to be Kaido's enemy, someone they look up to strongly, Oden, instead of claiming themselves, which is where Luffy does, is he doesn't care about who's before him or who's after him. He cares about himself and proudly being himself. That's why he always proclaims, anytime he fights someone or meets someone, he's Luffy, the person who's going to be king of the pirates. And I think already in the original story, identity and proclaiming your own identity and being proud of it was a strong theme in Wano, but in this case, they can bring it a lot further because there would be a lot of build up to it with Momonosuke and Yamato interacting and being in the story a lot longer. At the end of Wano, Yamato is met with another choice. Do they follow the Straw Hats to the end of the Grand Line, or do they stay in Wano and help Momonosuke to rebuild and open Wano the way it's supposed to be in the prophecy? I think in this case, it's definitely important that Yamato doesn't come with the Straw Hat. Firstly, because it's important that the Straw Hats know as little as they do going forward, because if, like, for whatever reason, one of them knows a lot more than the rest and things are being revealed as the story goes on, it kind of feels a little awkward knowing that someone could have just told them that was there the whole time, because Yamato knows quite a bit about stuff that the Straw Hats just don't know about yet because they were able to read Oden's logbook. So them being an option for the Straw Hats to find out a lot of stuff about the story going forward, even though we all know they wouldn't want to, people just wouldn't like it. And with people, I mean the readers, because there'd be someone there who could just explain all this stuff to them in the first place. And it would feel almost unnatural if they didn't somehow just talk about it. But also at the end of the day, Yamato's fruit was said to be the guardian deity of Wano. So I think for some reason or another, whoever has this fruit is supposed to be in Wano during the time of the return of Joy Boy and the bringing of the dawn. And obviously that's just speculation on my part, but I don't think that would be even brought into the story or brought up at all if it wasn't going to be important in some way. So I do think going forward, as Luffy discovers the One Piece and reaches a Laugh Tale, becomes a Pirate King, I think Yamato definitely has to be in Wano during that time, for one reason being to protect it. But also, there is still something big that we need to happen there, which is the awakening of Pluton, because we know at some point that's going to happen, whether it's by another force or if it's by the people of Wano, specifically being Momonosuke and Yamato in this case. But for whatever reason, I definitely think that awakening Pluton is part of opening the borders of Wano, and at the end of the day, awakening Pluton, which is under Wano, will end up probably breaking down the walls of Wano and revealing old Wano to the world, and that being what needs to happen for the return of Joy Boy. Obviously, during the events of this, Zunisha has to be involved in some way, just because of what we found out during Onigashima when Zunisha came and talked to Momonosuke. So they'll probably come and help to awaken the Pluton, or whatever it is with Pluton that happens. I think it's just going to bring down the walls, and it's going to involve Yamato, Momonosuke, Zunisha, and the return of Joy Boy, whether that be Luffy reaching the One Piece and finding out whatever happens, or whatever that is, or if it goes into leading, the world to the new dawn. So it could be after the fact, where Luffy is fighting the world government and bringing down Eam, or it could be used to bring down Eam in some way, or fight the Marines, or fight the world government in some way. But a lot of that is just theorizing and speculation on my end, and that's how I think the end of the story is going to go anyways, because at the end of the day, I think Yamato would end up in the same place they ended up at the end of the original story, because I think Oda is presenting Yamato in a way that they will be important to Wano being free and the borders being opened in some way or form. But anyways, guys, let me know what you think about this what if story, what you think about the theorizing at the end of it, and let me know your thoughts on, like, if this were the case, how do you think it would play out. And I was gonna do the other two scenarios, but I didn't want this video to be too long. Like, it'd probably end up being like 45 minutes, but I am willing to do like a part 1, part 2, and part 3. So if you guys are interested in something like that, just let me know, and subscribe so you can see it when it pops up, and like so we can get more videos coming like this. And like I said, comment your thoughts on it. Anyways, later guys, I'll see you in the next one.